Oh, no problem. I see people mulling around in the back, so I figured I'd just keep on speaker so that everybody hear me real well. Can everyone see the slides well? Because sometimes there's going to be some smaller letters that you may not be able to read it. So I just want to make sure that you can see it perfectly well. Saw that. I'll give you a brief introduction to myself for some of you that don't really know me that well. My name is Cameron Clark. As you can see, I'm a U.S. Marine. I'm active duty Marine Corps, stationed with Joint Task Force North out at Fort Bliss. My trade is an intelligence officer. I've had multiple tours in the Middle East, East Asia, as an intelligence officer, 2003, specifically with OIF, and then in Operation New Dawn in 2010, as well as one or two in the middle. But I'm a major in the United States Marine Corps, and I'm the OPSO for the J2 at Joint Task Force North at this time. I'm certified to brief anti-terrorism, force protection, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape, amongst a few other things. And I enjoy talking to people. I've talked to numerous people over the years, including General Mattis, who's now our Secretary of Defense, when he was a two-star, and I was a first lieutenant, just kind of like staring at him going, oh my gosh, this guy, because he's so intense. He doesn't present himself off as, but he's so intense and he's so deliberate that he's a really interesting person to brief. General Wright, I briefed him. He was the STRATCOM commander, but I briefed him when he was a two-star, and I was just a second lieutenant. And the ops guys gave me a really hokey scenario, and because he spent a little bit of time with my CO the night before, and it was an early morning flight, he just kind of went like this. Not my fault, but I put him to sleep. I've also briefed Admiral Olson and Admiral McCraven, who are both the Special Operations commanding officers. Those guys are real nice, real good to go. You think special operators, whether it be Green Berets, Marine Force Recon, Navy SEALs, are a little bit intense. Most of the time they're like, yeah, that's okay. But tonight I'm going to brief you on active shooter. And the reason why this is key is if you've seen the news, there's been a few incidents over the last few years that should bring us to a little bit of a reaction as far as seeing things and knowing things. A lot of people that I've briefed in the past over this, it's one of those, because we've had to sit through it every year for the last 12 years. So some of you this will be the first time you've ever seen some of this information. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Okay, with that, next slide. All right, this is the agenda. Now, the thing is, I'll give you a definition. I'll let you read it, let you absorb it, and if you have any questions over that, I'll talk through it, but I want you to be able to see what's going on. The active shooter incidents between 2000 and 2013 have been fairly significant on military posts. You've seen things in the news, and maybe it doesn't touch home with the civilian population. It does for veterans, and it does for the active duty, because we live with those guys. We work with those guys, and when an incident happens there, it really comes to bear on us. I mean, every Marine is a rifleman, So every one of us is dangerous in certain aspects. Yes, Secretary Napolitano, when she was Department of Homeland Security Secretary, said that one of the biggest dangers is veterans. It's not true, but we are more skilled than the average person just walking around the street because we've had to learn how to use a weapon, we've had to shoot. So to a certain point, it's right. But in the vast thing, we are so not that way. I'll talk to you about the threat, indications, prevention, what you should do in a situation, how the law enforcement will respond in a situation, as well as how you should interact with the law enforcement during those times. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Active shooter situation. The definition of an active shooter situation is when one or more subjects participating in a shooting spree. They're random, systematic. Generally, for the most part, in the last few years, they've been a response to something that just kind of twitched with the person. Whether it was the fact that they had emotional issues or political issues, it was just something, and they thought, in their mind, I'm going to do something, and it doesn't matter. I may be coming over here to bonk Fred in the head, but you're in the way. Many of the times it's a one person that just kind of flips the switch off of somebody. I've worked with bad bosses. I've worked with good bosses. Many of you in this room have had good experiences with people at work and bad experiences. And as a Christian, we try to make sure that even the bad experiences, we try to let it go. Let it go. This is not, we're supposed to forgive. We're supposed to do everything that's right. Next slide, please. Okay, the statistics are a little bit dated, but not overly so. 160 incidents occurred between 2000 and 2013. This is not taking into account the last 5 years because I didn't have the data, and the guys already did the brief. It's really good, so I just kind of adjusted it. The fatalities concerned are about 486, with wounded being in the 550, between 550 and 560. The statistics show, 13 years, that's roughly 10 incidents a year. Back in the 80s, we had an incident with the post office. Remember the postal shooting? And for a while there, everybody called somebody going postal. Active shooter is just the more politically correct way of saying someone went postal. Next slide, please. All right. The incidents, according to the FBI, are becoming more frequent. I don't necessarily say that that's incorrect or correct. Each year, something can happen. It could happen in Annapolis, Maryland. It could happen in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It really depends upon the issues that are at hand between someone and someone else. All the incidents, except for a handful, involve males. Sometimes that's, according to the FBI and according to other psychologists, males tend to do things to themselves or to others with a weapon. Whereas women, if they commit suicide or whatnot, typically it's something that they do to themselves. Males will act out and then do something to themselves then. That's kind of historical. Even in the Bible, we were just studying this morning, David was acting out and Saul acted out. So that's traditional, it's historical. Many of the times law enforcement, when they do arrive, the shooter's already taken his own life, or he makes the last desperate situation. Very few people in this situation will surrender. Typically, they are at that brink. Sometimes it's after an action they realize what they did and they regret. That's the reason why they take their own life instead of fighting it out. This is not the 1920s and 30s with John Dillinger running around committing acts of violence, or Bonnie and Clyde. These guys realize something, and it flips back, and they're like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Or they feel like they're in a situation where they cannot continue on. Let's see. Many of these incidents have occurred at schools. We had Columbine back in the 90s. We had the incident up in Connecticut. The two different incidents, both of them used weapons. The two kids in Columbine believed that they were being bullied extremely badly and took action. The kid up in Connecticut was sick in the mind, and his mother knew that, but didn't take the precautions to keep the weapons locked away where he could not get to them. He took her life, and then he took all those children's lives, and then he was dead as well after. Next slide, please. As you can see in this is ABC News statistics. This is not the FBI statistics, but these are the number of incidents that have gone each year in the last 15 years, besides 16 and 17. As you can see, incidents have gone up. Is there a lot of stress? Well, if you look at the bump, 2008 we had the bad recession. There was, and people were suffering, so it could have been financially reason why they decided they can't handle this any longer, or that person did something to me. Next slide. Okay, these are just a few of the incidents, and I'm not going to read them to you. I'm going to just kind of briefly talk over some of them. These are DOD incidents, Department of Defense. These are my brothers in uniform that have committed these acts for the most part. Soldiers killed a civilian over an alleged marital affair. That's nearly a crime of passion. A soldier shoots and kills his battalion commander due to a slight that maybe he was being charged for something minor by the commander, which is a battalion commander is kind of, well, he can file charges on somebody if they're UA, unauthorized absence, or AWOL, commit some sort of crime out in town, and he showed up, killed his commander. At a safety briefing, no less, which is, usually there's a guard there, so I guess that just didn't happen that day. I won't go too much into some of the other ones because of the fact that you can see a trend. Soldiers, whether they feel that they're soldiers, Marines, sailors that are disgruntled, issues, those are the incidents that happen in the DOD. Disgruntled fellow soldiers. Reservist does the same thing. The thing is, there is conflict. This is not like in a church setting, but I'm going to give you a brief setting on the next slide. If you can go to the next slide. Okay, these are the 14 to 16 stats. Sorry about that. Go ahead and go to the next one. Okay. Because we're in a church setting, I'm going to go into this one a little bit more in depth. These two incidents have happened over the last 3 years, since June of 2015. Dylan Roof, who was a white supremacist, wanted to act out. He went to this church's Bible study and committed this nefarious act. afterwards, he's in jail right now. He wasn't killed. But he had so much hate in him that he was going to act out. This kid previously had not been really an issue as far as law enforcement, so he was not on anybody's radar. But he was twisted by someone. The next incident, this was the most heartfelt for us down here in the Southwest. This happened just outside of San Antonio, and it happened last November. This individual goes into a church, and it was actually because he was acting out towards his family, and his family was not there that day. He proceeded to shoot people in the church, including children, and then he escaped, and two bystanders actually tracked him down and actually shot him and caused his death. The incident is so bad that, it nearly is on par with the Las Vegas shooting with the guy that was up in the tower. But this was an incident that really it shouldn't have happened, because people should have been more awake of what was going on within their family. You meet somebody, you greet somebody, and you don't know what they're really all about. The reason I introduce myself is some of y'all may not really know who I am or what I do for a living or what I've done in the past or whatnot. So this guy was a dishonorably discharged Air Force member. He should not have had a weapon first because the Air Force made a mistake. What they did not, when you're dishonorably discharged, Ray can attest to this since he runs a store, you have to fill out the paperwork, and if it says dishonorably discharged, you should be disqualified from it. But they did not pass that information into the data files for the gun store owner, to stop him from having a weapon. That's the first the bad piece of it. The second bad piece of it is we, as a church community, and they, as a church community, didn't recognize some of the signs that were going on. They were having difficulties. Some of his family members were going to church, but he wouldn't. Or when he did go to church, there were certain aspects of how he handled himself at church that were a little bit off. And I'm not saying that everybody in this room or everybody in the congregation needs to be a psychologist. But if you see something, hey, something's not right. Is everything okay? That's where we kind of fail in the community. We welcome everybody, we love everybody, but we don't, we're still human. We're still going to be about ourselves, about our wife, about our son, about our daughter, and not see, we might not see the problems that Rick's having in the back because his hat keeps falling off. Those type of things, little things. I pick up stuff, but here I'm comfortable. And that's where we're supposed to be. But I'm going to teach you a few things of what you should do. Next slide. Okay, these are some more statistics. And if you look at the stats, 12 minutes is about the incident time frame. 12 minutes, if someone comes through the door here, we have a greeter. That'll initially see somebody who's greeting, see something is wrong. Somebody's carrying an AR or a shotgun. Hey, what's going on here? And almost all the incidents end up with the shooter's fatality. That's really the bottom line. Yes, most of the time it's an active shooter, but it could be an active baseball bat. Fred and I play softball. Lorenzo plays softball. You see some of those guys swing a bat, or they could crush somebody's ribs, grape, whatever. There's people that have been known to use a knife. There's been stabbings and et cetera that fall into these categories. It's not just with a handgun or a rifle or a shotgun, but any weapon. You can use a chair and beat someone badly. Next slide, please. This is where I was talking about the threat. All right. We need to be kind of custodians of our brother and sister that are either side, because if you see something like this, most of the time these individuals, while they do commit a heinous act, killing somebody, they're generally from inside. In the military, it's inside that unit. You got that troubled kid. I've had them in the past. I had to have a kid on suicide watch because he was having so many difficulties. He'd spent 3 tours in Iraq, had an abusive father when he was young, and became, at 23, he was a full-blown alcoholic. I had to have him on suicide watch. He was a sergeant, an NCO, someone that, day-to-day operations I could depend on. It was off time when he was not working that he was at his worst, because he was just so bound up internally. He got better. He's had a family. He's since got out of the Marine Corps, and I think he's actually a youth minister in his native Georgia. So, he got better. But we had to find the signs for him to get better. We spend maybe 2, 3, 4 hours on a Sunday, an hour every other Saturday, an hour or 2 on a Wednesday. So you don't see everybody day to day like you do at work. You're there at work, you're there for 8 hours. You see X, Y, and Z, how they act, what they say. Sometimes I just don't want to be around that person. And I even do that at work. There's people that I'm just like, oh man, I don't want to be around them. But they could be that insider threat that they're talking about. He feels compelled to do something. And like I said, if you look at that, Major Hassan is the top one. His commanders knew that he had something wrong. He's the Fort Hood shooter that killed so many troops, and then he was shot by some MPs, and now he's spending the rest of his life in jail. The guy on the bottom is actually at the Navy Yard. He was a contractor, came with a shotgun and started shooting the place up. Wounded a bunch of people, killed a couple. But for instance, Hassan, he went from first lieutenant, he's a chaplain, but he's a Muslim chaplain. And then he's dabbling with intel work because of his knowledge. So he keeps going on, and they keep passing him up. They knew in his evaluations, but because nobody wanted to be politically correct and say, or nobody was being politically correct, they let him kind of slide on. And eventually, he was supposed to go on that deployment that those Army soldiers were getting ready to go to Afghanistan. He was supposed to go. He acted out. He'd already declared his support to the Islamic State, and he was going to do what he was going to do. It was just a matter of time, and he had an opportunity there. The soldiers were unarmed, because since 1993, we don't carry our weapons unless we're in that status all the time. It used to be, when I was a young Marine, we carried our weapons everywhere. Drug it along. Had to carry it everywhere. You're in the field. Here at the base. The only time you couldn't carry it was around the exchange, the commissary, or some of the 7-day stores. I don't know if you remember those times, Dwayne. No? Well, us in the Marine Corps, we had to carry the stupid thing all the time. Okay. Those incidents happen because of people trying to be politically correct, not saying something. If you can go to the next slide. I mean, the indicators are there. Sometimes it's the use of alcohol, illicit drugs. Sometimes it's violations of policies, whether it be a company or military. Unsolicited comments about firearms. I mean, you get somebody that says something crazy, hey, can I make a full auto out of this AR? Ray will be like, no. Well, you can, but you'll have to pay a price for it in the long run. But there's incidents. If you pick up certain things, whether you be at work, I mean, I work at DOD, but if you're working at the university or if you're working out in town, you'll see these things. You could be painter, you could be contractor of any number of things. You pick up certain aspects of how people respond. Now, there are jobs that people do drink a lot, and we were kind of laughing a little bit about it. And you hear somebody that's a contractor, you might hear quite a bit of language, but there's certain indications that the guy is depressed or the lady is depressed. You'll see those certain things. Now, life is not easy, but you'll pick up these things. Severe mood swings. I mean, I'm happy now, but I could be sad in 5 minutes. I get that way anyway because of the medication I have to take. So, next slide, please. Okay. How do you prevent these things? I already mentioned that we need to welcome those that come in. But if you see a sign, you kind of understand what's going on with them. A respectful workplace and an environment, that's without saying in this modern world. But, if you work in construction, I've been on jobs where guys are just brutal to each other. It says report suspicious or violent behavior to your supervisor, next higher supervisor. This is designed for those of us in the military and those of us that are in that kind of situation. But at church, if I'm having problems, Fred's going to see it, or Ray will see it, or Rick, or Dwayne. Kind of get those people off to the side and say, hey, is everything okay? I mean, we do that anyway, but you kind of have to own your brother a little bit. Own your brother or sister as far as that's concerned. Next slide, please. Okay. Initial responses. All right. This is how you survive an incident. Now, the issue that I do have with this is a situation where you have to see what's going on. Everyone is out for their own survival in the long run in a situation, a bad situation at that. But you have to adopt a survival mentality in order to be able to survive. I'm going to teach a few things, and it's fairly simple, but if you've never had to do that, it would be important for you to understand. First off, it says to run, to evacuate, to get out of the facility, right? If I clap my hands right now, can anybody I would like to see how many people could point to the exits. We got different ones. They're right here. Okay. What you need to do is when you come into a facility, and I always do this, and it's just because of the fact that I've been in Iraq and seen situations where you need to be able to get to a point where you can engage the enemy, but to get out of the line of fire. Evacuation. The door is right behind Ray and Rick. Those are the two lines of entrance. If somebody comes in to do harm, they're going to come through the front door. They're not going to slip through the back door because their mindset is to do harm to someone. All right. The issue that is associated with that is that's that door. If you know how to get out that way, that's fine. If you know how to get out that way. But your closest door, if they're coming this way, could be back behind you. They talk about who's flown on an airplane. Big planes. Okay, most everybody has. What are they call flight attendants now? Not stewardesses, but flight attendants. They tell you this and this and this, and the door, the closest exit could be behind you. Same thing goes when you come into a facility, whether it be church, Walmart, workplace, because I may not know where you work, but I'm sure that they do fire drills. You could be at school if you're a teacher. You do fire drills to get your kids out. As a parent, you desperately want your child to know how to get out, because if an emergency situation arose, they're supposed to get through. All right, hide out. I'm going to tuck down here real quick. Ray, can you tell me if a 9mm would hit me from here? Okay, would it go through this? All right. That's just an example. Okay, so hiding out could be jump back there with Marco. He's back there, he's like, wah! Everybody's jumping at it. Could be getting behind a more solid structure. Or, even if you exit a facility, find a place to hide out. The last one is to prevent an active shooter from entering your hiding places, you stop him at the door. It's dangerous. Okay? Sometimes with us, I've got like 2 steel doors between me and somebody that would come in, because I work in a classified environment. Most of the other doors are not as heavy duty. So they, try to block the door. You put a chair to block it so they can't come through. And the last incident that you want to do is to fight. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay. The last incident you want to do in a situation is fight. But if we're in this situation, you got to be aggressive with the person. If it's in a situation where from me to Fred, I'm taking the mic stand and I'm throwing it at him. Because at this point, he's got me. I got to fight back. And many times those people they're mentally broke up here. Somebody fights back, they're not expecting that. In school, if a bully picked on somebody back in my day, and you stood up to him, you backed him off. He stopped bullying. It's roughly the same mentality. If you're hiding, though, I don't have my cell phone on me. Who has their cell phone? Almost everybody's got a cell phone. Turn that thing like volume mute. Because if you're hiding, this is like playing hide and seek back as a kid. You do not want that person to find you. So, you hear a phone ring, that draws attention. This is designed for like a workplace where we have desks and heavy doors and whatnot. So they're talking about hiding behind your desk. Well, my desk is wood, but it's particle board for the most part. But I'm still going to hide if I have to. I'm too old and too slow nowadays to sit there and try to outrun somebody. I may hide and fight like that. Okay, I'm hidden. Oh, he's here, I'm fighting. But you got to take a mentality, if you do commit to fight, this is it. Am I right? Okay. Somebody will definitely dial 911, but dialing 911 does not mean that they're going to get there as fast as what you'd hope. Average reaction time, I think, is 7 to 11 minutes in Las Cruces for a cop to come to a call. My son, who's a firefighter in New Mexico State, actually showed up at a domestic violence call. He's a firefighter. And the cop hasn't made it there. They beat the cops to the domestic violence call, and he got shot at. So, those type of things happen. So you got to be prepared to hide or fight at that point if you can't run. It says to leave the line open once you call 911, because they'll track it down. It takes them a little while longer, but it'll track them down. Next slide, please. We recognize this? This is an overhead. I'm going to do the big map little hand thing. Okay. I don't know how we got it set up, but these are the three based off of an incident. If you have an incident that starts at the foyer to come through the main doors, you definitely want to be back over here to hide out. And there is some, we were walking around and I noticed this, there is some like little hills and whatnot to kind of hide behind. That's a good thing. Same thing over on the northwest side of the facility. The youth, have you all practiced fire drills or anything like that? Okay, that would be a good thing to be able to let them know where they need to go to be safe. An assembly area, how we look at it, is where you get your head counts. And we're not doing the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. I'm not speaking on a Sunday and counting how many people we have in the room. This is where you and your family, or you and your friend, need to kind of be mindful of each other so that if you get separated, you know where to go to, that you can get back and, okay, Rick's not here. I'm picking on Rick tonight, so I picked on Fred earlier, so I won't pick on Clarissa because she's too mean. But, you know, if me and Rick are doing this buddy thing and we get separated, I need to be able to tell someone that's in charge, hey, I can't find Rick. Rick could be hiding in an incident. I've escaped, but Rick's hiding. So, you know, just to keep kind of watch over your friend. We have a lot of single people that come in and they're by themselves. If you notice them, hey, you know, you don't have to say, hey, there's going to be an emergency. We got to get out of here. But you might want to say, hey, just kind of keep an overwatch. Being your brother's keeper. Next slide, please. All right. This is where it gets kind of tricky. When law enforcement comes, remember we said run, hide, fight. Law enforcement comes, they're armed. They're expecting an incident with a shooter. They're going to come in kind of aggressively, more so than what you see Joe, the police officer, or Bob, the detective. They're going to come in aggressively because it's a situation. When the officers arrive on scene, you know, you need to get down. I mean, down on the ground. Down on the ground. Do not present as a threat, because if they see you as a threat, they may accidentally become aggressive to you as well as shoot. And it's happened in the past, I can give you a funny anecdote. Scott O'Grady was a pilot that was shot down during the Bosnia-Serbia issue. He was shot down. He was a survival, evasion, resistance, and escape officer for his squadron. He went to SEER school, got to eat bugs, blah, blah, blah. He gets shot down. He's hiding out. Well, they sent a Marine unit to come to rescue him. The Marines didn't know who's aggressor, who's not aggressor at this point. The platoon that arrived fanned out in an area. They knew approximately where he was. Well, he made the bad mistake, and he got a few knots and a few bruises and I think a couple of broken ribs out of it. But he came running because he was so excited to the Marines, and the Marines just took him down. He's lucky he did not get shot. He had a firearm in his hand and was running at the Marines. So that's why I say stay down. The police or law enforcement will come and, you know, they'll find who's trying to just be safe. Like I said, you know, the assembly point where you escape to, that's sufficient. That way you can talk to the law enforcement. Okay, Rick's missing. I don't know where he's at. Come to find out, Rick's back there with Marco. I didn't know Marco was back there, but he's back there with Marco. They're hiding out because they're still staying put because they went through Cameron's class and realized that they couldn't run, but they're safe there. Until you get an all clear, you do not want to leave a safe location. Seriously. Because if you're running around and the cops have cleared this area and you end up in an area where they haven't cleared, now you're doing the whole thing over again. I'm getting down. Okay, next slide. It says to remain calm. In a situation like this, an active shooter situation or an incident or a natural disaster, we've seen on the news, what is the reaction of people with a natural disaster or an incident? Ah! Okay? It says to remain calm. I understand that. I understand everybody else's reaction. Even the most tough dude sometimes panics. If you got anything in your hands, keep it out. Hands open. If they say something and they want you to raise your hands, keep them spread like that. If they want you to stand spread, I think it was Columbine. You had the kids that were doing this and were walking out. So the cops that had reacted to the situation didn't think that they were an aggressor. And that was the instructions for the police. They could have reacted faster, might have saved some lives, but they did save quite a few because those kids were armed to the teeth. It says avoid making quick movements towards officers. Scott O'Grady running at the Marines. Don't do that. Don't point, yell, scream. I know he's over there! Don't do that because that draws attention from what they're doing to you, and that may be bad. I think I seen it in a video, and I should have put it on this. A police officer shot a guy accidentally. Well, I think it was intentionally, but he said it was accidentally. The guy got out of his vehicle. The officer said, "Hey, I need your registration." The guy reaches in to get his registration, but he reaches kind of quickly, and the cop, new on the job, a little bit pistol happy, shoots the guy in the leg. And the guy's yelling at him, "You shot me in the leg!" It's funny to me because being a Marine, not funny to everybody else that's in this situation. If they're telling you to clear off to an area and they've got you they want people in a secure environment, don't stop and say, "Hey, Fred, I know that we got things going on, and Clarissa, I'm going to pick on you now. Hey, what about this incident?" No, you just keep going to the point that they want you to go to because that's a safety area. Then it lets them do their jobs. Next slide, please. Okay. If the police officer or the law enforcement officer stops you and asks you, "Hey, did you see the shooter?" "Yes, he was over there." "Okay. Well, what did I just do?" "I pointed." "No. He's over there in the sanctuary. He's in the hall." Try not to point because it draws eye attention away. How many shooters? "Oh, there was 2. Or there's 1. Or there was a platoon of wild Aboriginal ants." I don't know. If you can, give them a description. It's just like witnessing a crime. If Clarissa sees Fred standing on his head, well, guess what? She's going to know exactly what he was doing. But did she know what color shirt he was wearing? Try to give the best description you can because that way, if that guy's trying to blend in, the shooter is, they know who he is. Types of weapons. Who knows the difference between an AR-15 and an M1 Garand? A few. Okay. I'll tell you this much. Dooney, Burke, and I don't know another person. You know the difference? Lorenzo knows the difference. You know, a lot of people don't know firearms very well. Some of them do, and that's great. You know, I carry a Colt 357 Magnum or a Colt 1911 Series 70 45 ACP. That's my personal weapon. But I know what those are. You ask my wife what they are, it's a Colt. And she's fairly familiar with firearms, but she doesn't know like the model or whatnot. She was calling the AR-15 that I gave my son and daughter for Christmas an M4. It looks like an M4, but it's not. There's a lot of things that are associated with that. Was he swinging a bat? Did it have a chain on it? You know, that type of thing. Remember I said earlier, it can be an active shooter incident with somebody with a club. Okay, hey, he's got a club. He's swinging it around crazy. Could be like my poor son was in Quantico. He was about 5 years old. And this little kid had this bat. And he had a little bit of issues, that kid did. But he was like swinging it wildly. And my poor son come around the corner and pow, right on the nose. For like 15 years, he had a little red mark on his nose. And the mom was like, oh, I'm sorry. Well, why didn't you stop him from swinging the bat? Could be the same situation. Next slide, please. This is where I talked about accountability for your family or your friends. You know, you want to make sure that everybody's good. My psychological state and somebody else's psychological state is a little bit different. I've seen a lot, been in a lot of places that are nasty and awful. Somebody else may not have experienced that, and this is the first incident that they've ever seen. So their psychological state could be a little bit more traumatic to them. This is where we keep our brother and sister, and we try to help them out. Next slide, please. Okay. Now then, do I have any questions?
For those people that are armed in the congregation, where should they be sitting?
I would suggest, if you're armed and it would be closer to a clear line of sight. Meaning a clear line of sight could be this doorway, because that's where an active shooter will come through, or that doorway. If you're sitting in an area where you're able to, and if you're defending, you have to have a clear line of sight. If I'm sitting over here, right here, do I have a clear line of sight of the door? I'm like going through people to have a line of sight. But if I'm sitting on the edge of the rows, I have a clear line of sight. That's what I would suggest. Go ahead. Yes. Typically, I don't know how I'm not in charge, right? So, yeah. But once we have, once we have organized things, that would probably be a good idea. Just because of the fact that, you never know. I mean, the majority of the incidents I talked about were DOD. The reason why, if you look at the top of the screen, it says Joint Task Force North. This was designed for me in the military and my brother and sister uniform members and the government civilians that work there, as well as the contractors. There's a lot more incidents, as you noted. I mean, I went through 3 pages that were military from 2000 to 2013. There's a lot more incidents out in town. We had an incident, and this guy had declared for, basically for ISIS, and he attacked the woman at the meeting. meat processing plant in Oklahoma. Killed her, and brutally, with a knife. Not with a gun, but with a knife. And attacked another person. But they hid and they fought back until the police arrived, who took him down. That's why I said it's not just a piece, a gun, semi-automatic rifle or shotgun or whatever. It can be anything. In that situation, it was a knife.
Sorry to ask so many questions, but one thing was about concealed weapon permit. Are we better, should those people that are on point, should they have a concealed weapon permit?
I would have to turn that over to. Okay, if to not pose a threat to those that are around you, you probably want to conceal it. New Mexico is an open carry law. I mean, I could carry on my hip, no biggie. So this is where we're supposed to feel safe. And some people are a little less pro-gun or whatnot, so they're going to be a little bit more defensive towards you. Fred and Dwayne have known me for like 5 years now. I mean, I'm very happy. I'm very cheerful for the most part. They've only seen me upset when we're playing softball and somebody makes an error, and I'm like, oh! But they know me about that, and they know that I'm a Marine, and I don't carry now, but you don't know what that other person is going to say or feel. I would advise a conceal just so that you're not. I mean, I'd have to turn that over to someone else that's more.
Let's talk about concealed weapons permit. And here's where I'm coming from. In Arizona, I'd gotten my permit.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked up to the detective, and I slapped him on the shoulder and said, hey, you won't believe what I just did. I signed up, and I got my concealed weapon permit. He said, why are you so stupid to do that? His explanation was that I know that I should not shoot someone unless they're in the house and really trying to physically harm me or my wife or whomever.
Yeah.
But what I'm asking is for the people in the church, do you feel that, you personally, do you feel they should have the concealed weapon?
I don't. I do, and I don't. I'm sorry to be very. I do because of the fact that I would want everybody, that even those that are not associated with firearms, to feel welcome, and that might make somebody feel upset if you're not concealed. I don't because of the fact that an open carry is actually, I come through the room, I see somebody's carrying. If I was going to commit an act of violence or whatnot, I might take a second guess. Do not be a victim is the prime thing. If you have the means to protect yourself, I would suggest that you have it. But you don't necessarily need it.
I'm not sure. The question is, if you saw somebody with an open firearm, it may make people uncomfortable at church. So I think that's why.
Yeah, I just.
Concealing it makes people feel because they might not know who the person is personally who has a.
You might not know that that person is part of the security, especially new people.
Well, what I'm after is the permit. I know the gun can be open carry. I'm not suggesting that, but I'm saying.
Yeah, I think the law. It's the law to, if you're going to conceal it, that you have to have it.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, that's a very. I can't make policy, but personally, I just look at it as if someone is new, doesn't know anybody, they come in and they see everybody's toting, they'd be like, oh wow, we come into the wild, wild west. Especially if they're from a state that does not use firearms on a regular basis. And that you're part of the safety.
And they could come to you, something's going on.
Yeah.
Say,
I would have to turn that over to the folks with inside the church to be able to. I can't go any further than that, but we're still working on that? Okay. Any other questions? Please. Yeah, he's fine. He's fine. It was just like he stayed in the vehicle because it was like, whoa. It was kind of funny. We went out and Ray was giving a class, and we were going to go out there, and there was a lot of people there that were doing the shoot. So we went to the next berm. And it's been a while since I've been in Iraq and had rounds shot over my head. We were setting up our targets, and we were like, okay, get down a little bit. It was safe. It was just that I hadn't had that in like 7 years, so I was a little bit, oh. And he'd had that experience, so he was like, are you sure you want to shoot up here? Oh, we're fine. We got the big berm. It's not directed at us. It's just that you're going to hear a ricochet that goes over your head. Lorenzo. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. No,
Never offended anyone when we asked them, are you carrying, because you look like you've got something, oh, I'm sorry, no, that's my wallet, or this, and one guy did have one, and we asked him to be escorted him back to his car, just to leave it there, and he could come back in the church. That was fine, and nobody ever had a problem with it.
I think it's person dependent, to be honest with you. Anytime a situation, I mean, somebody asked me, hey, am I carrying? Well, if I am, you're definitely going to see it. But if I am, it's personality dependent. Some people will be like, oh, yeah, I'll go put it in the vehicle. Some people are like, hey, this is my right, a little bit off, but so it's personality dependent. And I hate to say it that way because my personality and your personality are different. And Fred and Clarissa, right?
Lorenzo, too, I bet you turn more people away by telling them they can't have their kids in surgery. I've seen that happen more than I have with anybody with a gun, and tell them, go put the car in front of my kid. They're fine with that. But they can't leave their kids out, and they won't come back.
I think that's something that will have to present itself more as we get a little closer. The more we think about it, the more, you know. Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe I'll bring on my strap, 45 Colt. And
There's a lot of training that goes into it for people in security, and you learn how to deal with personalities and stuff when you're talking to someone, so that they don't come off to them real aggressive. And they understand that it's for their own safety.
Yeah, and it's, different churches are very different, and I know a lot of churches, like in Texas,
Well, specifically after that incident.
Yeah, especially these really big churches, because, you know, they don't know who the good guy or the bad guys are, especially the big churches, because they don't know everybody. And, you know, if anybody that starts pulling a gun, they don't know what the intent is. So, you know, churches are different and different sizes and how they have different setup, but it's all for the safety of the congregation. So, you know, they have to consider and weigh all the aspects of.
It's a very difficult question.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And you don't want to interfere in somebody's right, but you don't want to, you want to make sure everyone's safe. Rick? Anybody else have any questions? Okay, with that, I'm going to turn over to Ray for just a moment.
Is this on? There it is. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for Cameron for doing the presentation. So I'm Ray. I'm heading up the ministry. That's Emerson right over there with the funny looking hat, and he helps me. So just to cap, because last time we did this, everybody had a lot of questions. So what we're doing is the first thing on the agenda is to do a fire drill. We have to schedule that. We'll do it for first and second service, and then we will do it. We will try and do it once a quarter or once every 6 months or so. The second thing we want to do is we want to do a CPR class. And the reason for that is CPR and first aid classes are important because those are useful throughout everything we do. Because you get people who choke or little kids who have issues or cut themselves or something. So those are just good basic things to know how to do. What we'd like to do in the safety ministry is we'd like to arrange for the police department to come down and they can give us a field medic class. And the difference between a field medic class and CPR or first aid is that the field medic class deals with more like stabbings, gunshots, explosives. So we know how to address those issues. And then we need to arrange a time for the police to come and give the leadership, that's what we're trying to hope to do, to get the leadership in on the local aspect of the active shooter, because there's a lot of information that Cameron doesn't have access to that the local police will give us access to. And then we'd like to do, and if you all were interested, like Lorenzo back there, if you're interested, I talked to the SWAT guys, and they actually will give us a CCW class if anybody's interested. We just got to figure out what kind of numbers we have to get to have that class. Then range of time for the greeters, teachers, and security team to get together so we can role play some incidences that could occur and how to handle those incidences. And the reason we'll role play these things is because it stays in our memory longer and we retain these things better. The fifth thing we'd like to do as well is develop protocols. That way we have written protocols, and if something's happening and that person's not here, we know what to do next, no matter who's here. And then arrange a date for those who are interested in, if you don't want to carry a gun, or if you want to carry a gun, doesn't really matter to me, but we can get a class for pepper spray training as well. So we have a less than lethal option. And then the things that we need to do urgently, this is what I want to do quickly, conduct that fire drill. Schedule dates and times for people to pull security, develop those protocols to handle hostile individuals, get trained on how and what to tell law enforcement when we call them. What's that person wearing? What are they doing? How tall are they? What do they look like? What kind of car are they driving? Those things, because those things are critical, because if we harden the door, meaning if we present a hard target, people will turn away and they'll walk away. But they may go down because First Baptist is right over there on Sonoma Ranch. Maybe they'll go over there. So us calling the police and telling them, hey, we got this guy who just did this. State police is right by them. Maybe we're protecting them too. And then again, the urgent thing we need to do is get people trained on how to deal with possibly hostile people, how to disarm them. Not meaning take their gun away or take their knife away or what have you, but bring the situation down, calm them down. That's what we're trying to do. Anybody have any questions? No? Then I guess this meeting is adjourned. You want to